The voice of sharing Durian ASEAN.
Hey, this is Arlene, and you are listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. For today's our ASEAN breakfast call from 8 to 10 o'clock, we'll be serving you with a lot of news from Southeast Asia, as well as a discussion on Blast from the Grassroots, which is just highlighting grassroots initiatives all around Southeast Asia and Malaysia, as well as discussing on real key issue that is happening right in Southeast Asia at our ABC dialogue. So first of all, just to let you know, if you want to connect with us, you can go to www.durianasean.com, or you can go to our Facebook, Twitter, as well as you can always connect with us via email by sending an email to durianasean@gmail.com. We look forward to hear your feedback on our ASEAN Breakfast Call news reading, and as well as we hope that you would enjoy, trying to be more, trying to understand more about the news in Southeast Asia. So talking about news, I have to start with the first news of today. It was reported by Brew Direct. The news headline was Micronas graduates to undertake challenges in competitive local job market. So the summary of the story was Bandar Sri Begawan, this country is reported in Bandar Sri Begawan, which is in Brunei. The country cannot escape the tide of dynamics and competitive global changes. Hence, dynamics and appropriate human capital is the main factor to ensure sustainable national development. Speaking at the Micronet International College graduation ceremony, the Ministry of Education Yang Berhormat Pehin Orang Kaya Sri Kema Datuk Sri Setia Dr. Haji Awang Abu Bakar Haji Apong said education and skills are vital, basic requirements in supporting economic development and progress of any nation. So, the Ministry of Education emphasizes that the education is one of the government's major investments. Yang Berhormat added, there are many challenges in building and providing an education system that gave every student the opportunity to fill the workforce requirements and maintain economic growth through diversification. An issue that needed attention was the skills mismatch among graduates. The minister highlighted that His Majesty the Sultan and Yang di-Pertuan Agong Brunei Darussalam at the recent Isra Mi'raj celebration gave consent to the Brunei Technical Institution Order 2013, the Technical and Vocational Transformation White Paper, and the Brunei Darussalam Technical Education Upgrading Plan 2013-2018. So that's the story on the Micronet graduates to undertake challenges in competitive market. The next one is reported by Vientiane Times regarding on climate change adaptation needed to ensure food security. Climate change is the main factor that can affect agricultural productions, reducing plants growth and rice yield. Each year, the impact of flooding and drought in Laos destroy thousands of hectares of rice and other commercial crops as well as livestock. Well, unfortunately, the government only maintained a limited budget to spend on disaster prevention activities. With good collaboration and assistance from international organizations, it will definitely enhance the cooperations, and it should possible help the victims as well of such a natural disaster through climate change adaptation. So for Lao government officials from relevant sectors and international organization representative gathered recently in Vientiane to discuss methodologies, measures, and a policy for reducing the impact of climate change. Well, it's great that Laos is taking the lead in terms of addressing the issue of climate change. As we know, we also address Brunei is also taking the lead in terms of creating a more greener lifestyle. But I think addressing climate change directly would be the way forward. And I think I definitely applaud Lao government for for trying to create policies and measures to reduce the impact of climate change in their country. And I think other Southeast Asian countries should also push forward for that sort of reforms in policy, climate change reforms. Anyway, the next one is about the story of a boat sinks off Western Malaysia, which 66 Indonesians feared already drowned. It was reported by Reuters. It states that 66 people are suspected to be dead after a boat carrying illegal migrants capsized in western coast of Malaysia. So there were 97 passengers on board. The passenger included women, children, and the boat was not fit for a sea voyage. As stated by Muhammad Zuri. He's an official with the Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency. He even said this was an illegal boat and all the passengers were Indonesians. He said that 61 people are currently now missing, and later clarified that only 31 passengers had been rescued. The agency had sent one boat to the area to search for survivors and was sending 2 more, one spokesman said. And Malaysian news Straits Times said that the boat sank around midnight on Tuesday, about 2 miles or 3 miles from the coastal town of Banting on the Straits of Malacca. Malaysia had recently Malaysia has recently introduced strict measures against illegal migrants. The country remains an attractive destination to foreign workers from the South and Southeast Asia region. Move on to the next news is also about Malaysia. Health Ministry moves centralized MC monitor system. As reported by the Malay Mail Online, the Health Ministry is mulling a centralized system to allow employers to track records of medical leave accumulated by employees. The Deputy Health Minister, Datuk Sri Dr. Hilmi Yahya, said the system was similar to the Credit Tip-Off Service, or CTOS, adopted by the banking industry. He said that the system was introduced, a special security number would be present on medical sheets, MC issues by doctors. The centralized serial number will be monitored by an appointed body under the proposed system, and there will be no room for abuse, as we will be able to track as they will be able to track MC's issues to patient by doctors. So Dr. Hilmi also further said that the ministry was also studying if it was feasible to adopt a system practiced in Japan where employers deduct the salary of employees who took leave without valid reasons. Malaysia Employees Federation Executive Director Dr. Shamsuddin Bardant, who was also present at the seminar, said Malaysian employers lost an estimated 8.2 billion in 2013 because of medical leave. So as Malaysia aspires to be a high-income nation by 2020, the government is taking a step to achieve the target. Would such meticulous measure be welcomed by the workers, though? That remains something to be seen. The next story, we go to Myanmar. Reuters reported that Myanmar's economy can grow 8.5% in current fiscal year, as reported by the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund. These experts predicted that Myanmar's economy to grow by 8.5% during the next year, and Myanmar has launched sweeping economic and political reforms under its quasi-civilian government, which came to power in 2011. The IMF, which set up a monitoring program in Myanmar in 2013, said it would intensify its technical assistance and training. Team leader Matt Davies told Reuters, and the Central Bank of Myanmar had undergone huge change over the past 2 years, including gaining independence over the finance ministry and managing a floating exchange rate. And Davies said that he expects there will be more foreign investment in manufacturing, telecommunication, and natural resources. The country still remained mired in multiple regional and ethnic concerns. These issues might be a major source of concerns for many foreign investors. Let's move to Singapore. So, Singapore news is quite mainly focused on the news of the CPF, as blogger Roy Ng has responded to Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong on a statement of claim in an ongoing defamation suit, saying Mr. Lee claim to damages and legal costs is unnecessary and unwarranted. And PM's damages claim unwarranted. The blogger said that he would not. He was stood on his ground, and he definitely say that the claim by Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong is unwarranted. So Mr. Ng is being sued for defamation of allegation in May 15th. Blogspot that Mr. Lee, who is also a chairman of State Investment from GIC, criminally misappropriated a Central Provident Fund savings. And Mr. Ng has stated that such an allegation was false and without foundation. In a letter of demand to Mr. Ng, on May 18th, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong demanded that the blogger immediately remove the May 15 blogspot, publicly apologize to the Prime Minister, and write in with an offer of damages and costs. Mr. Ng acceded to these damages, taking down the post a day after the letter and apologizing publicly on May 23rd. But in fact, he even offered a 5,000 Sing dollar as a compensation for Mr. Ng. But on the other hand, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong turned down the offer and dismissing it as very sorry, and asked for aggravated damages after Mr. Ng failed to remove a YouTube video and sent emails to local and international media republishing posts he had promised to take down. Mr. Lee is not entitled to aggravated damages as that was up to the court to decide. That was actually being expressed by Mr. Ravi, who is Mr. Ng's lawyer. Mr. Ng also called for blogger Roy Ng, he called for more transparency and accountability, and he spoke there at the Labor Day protest in Hong Lim Park on 1st May 2014, which was attended by 6,000 people. Mr. Ng has responded to Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong's statement of claim in an ongoing defamation suit, saying Mr. Lee's claim for damages and legal costs is unnecessary and unwarranted. And Mr. Ng said that there was no enough clarity on connections between CPF monies. GIC and Temasek He also questioned if there was a conflict of interest by having ministers sit on the board of GIC, which is the fund manager of the government assets. Mr. Ng also called for more transparency and accountability on public monies and the reserve, claiming that the late former President Ong Tee-cheong also had locked horns with the government over the issue during his term. So blogger Roy Ng anyway has been fired by his employer Tan Tong Seng Hospital with immediate effect, as he was accused of misusing the Tan Tan Tong Seng hospital time and resources to pursue personal and non-job related interests. This to me personally the issue. I mean the CPF fund squabble between the Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong and also Mr. Roy Eung, the blogger Mr. Roy Eung, is a very interesting one, because now you're beginning to see a certain cracks within Singapore politics. It used to be like, I mean, I think during the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s, it used to be a very one government party sort of voices. So this is actually, to be honest, very positive. And even there was 6,000 people attended the Labor Day protest, which blogger Roy Eung were there. And to be frank, the CPF issue is definitely a very relevant one. It's not something that is an issue within certain political parties or certain individuals, but it affects the whole of Singaporean population, especially this money are being reinvested for other purposes that the Singaporean publics have no clue about. So definitely seeking for more transparency, accountability on public monies and the reserve is definitely a good move by Mr. Roy Eung. That's what I think and I see it. But at the same time, I think it is a tradition in Singapore within the Singaporean government to sort of keep everything within themselves, make the decision within themselves as well. They have this mentality, the government knows best, and the public just need to stay calm and sit and just, give their trust towards the government. And to some extent, I think in these current times, it's no longer working, that sort of we know best attitude by the Singaporean government. So in a way, a bit of democracy, a bit of engagement, citizens' engagement is definitely needed in this situation, and not just in the situation of the CPS of the savings and funds, but also in other areas of Singaporeans' governance. And moving on to another news, in Cambodia. So Cambodia slams Thailand over post-coup worker exodus, as reported yesterday in Channel News Asia. There were like more than 100,000 Cambodian workers, migrant workers. Actually, they were so scared of the coup and the military that they fled all the way back to their home. And the Cambodian government has accused Thailand's new military rulers of fomenting an exodus of migrant workers, which it claimed had caused at least 8 deaths and economic hardship for both countries. Some 188,000 Cambodians, that's the final count, I guess, who kept major Thai industries afloat, but often lack official work permits, have streamed across the border since the junta warned last week the illegal foreign workers face arrest and deportation. At a meeting in Bangkok on Tuesday, Cambodia's ambassador and Thailand's top foreign minister bureaucrats agreed to quash rumors of a crackdown and to set up a hotline on labor issue. And the total number of Cambodians returning from Thailand via Poi Phet and smaller border crossing has now reached 188,000, said Koh Sam Sion, governor of Cambodia's northwestern province of Bante, Min Khe, which the main checkpoint is based. So the migrant workers said that he suspected the Cambodia mass returns compared to Myanmar's workers' minimal returns so far reflects the more sensitive political relationship between the Thailand and Cambodia. And this was spoken by the migration policy expert Andy Holt. The next one we want to cover Indonesia. So haze is one of Indonesia's biggest problem. But Indonesia's haze pollution defenses is not enough. And this was stated by one green group that is monitoring Indonesia. It was reported by Reuters that Indonesia's promises to tackle the upcoming annual haze season with a 30 million fund and limited military equipment have been called into question by experts anticipating worse pollution levels than last year's due to the El Nino weather pattern. And with expectations high that the El Nino dry weather pattern will hit around the middle of the year, the haze could be worse than in 2013, conservation experts told Reuters. We are expecting El Nino, and if it comes, we are going to see much more fire than last year. The heavy smokes from slash and burn clearance often comes from the island of Sumatra and Kalimantan, where large forest concessions are used by pulp and paper and palm oil companies, some of which are listed in Singapore. Yu Yohono, who has Yu Yohono, who has reached his 2-term limits, introduced a moratorium on forest clearing during his 10 years in office and will be keen to maintain its environmental credentials. Talking about the El Nino, I think a lot of people in Southeast Asia might be in the dark about what is El Nino, and the El Nino dry weather has been cast in Malaysia before and probably in Southeast Asia as well, and it's an extreme dry weather pattern which hit around the middle of the year. The haze could be worse than 2013, and this is something that we definitely should prepare. Even in country of Malaysia, at least it is being pushed by NGO in Indonesia. But what about in Malaysia? Are there any green group NGO that has been, spoken out on the issue of El Nino? But most importantly, has the government prepared enough in terms of tackling the El Nino? Because it's an extreme dry weather pattern that would cause much more fires in certain areas in these countries. So definitely more preparation is needed. And the last news of today, we have in Philippines. So Manila is seeking for early tribunal ruling over sea disputes with China. The Philippines said it will ask an international arbitrations tribunal to make an speedy ruling on its dispute with China over exploitation waters in the South China Sea after Beijing refused to take part on the proceeding. So the story goes that Manila is seeking confirmation at the tribunal of its rights to exploit waters in its 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone as allowed under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UN clause. Early the month, China rejected a notice from the tribunal which gave Beijing until December 15 to reply its first international case filed against it over the potential energy-rich waters. Because China is not participating and because the situation is getting worse every day in the South China Sea, he's one of the person from Philippines is asking their legal team in the US if they could present a request to the tribunal to hasten the process. It was stated by Del Rosario. China has said all along it will not participate. It preferred a bilateral approach to resolving conflict. In March, Manila made its formal submission to the tribunal. The South China Sea issue is very complicated because, of course, in this particular piece of news, it's just between Philippines and China, and some parts of the sea that is belonging to the Philippines. But when it comes to China, it wants the whole of South China Sea and to reclaim it. And this is something that is the pattern is being seen much more obvious in these current times as China's economic power grows bigger. And when it comes to the history of the South China Sea, it has, in the early 2000s, China and the rest of Southeast Asia were, the focus at that time were concerning on the issue of the Spratly Islands and a few other islands in the South China Sea. But it hasn't been resolved till yet. At the same time, China is also reclaiming the whole of China Sea as belonging to theirs. They are also, putting on their own people in terms of having schools in certain islands of the Spratly Islands, and also at the same time is trying to extract the rich minerals within the sea, and one of it is digging the oil rig, and so Beijing said on Monday that China has the right to do what it wanted on the islands that were Chinese territory, and criticized the Philippines for what it called Manila's illegal occupation of some of them and construction works there. So the issue here, who owns the South China Sea? I think there's a pattern here where there's a clear borders between countries in terms of landmass, but when it comes to the sea mass, it's still a very blur territory where there's really no clear border in terms of who owns which part of the sea. Although the UN's clause or the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea has already created that district on who owns which part of the sea. So it's just in a way that I think China and the rest of Southeast Asia should definitely resolve it, either on the regional level or the bilateral level, or even at the UN level. I think the more prolonged the issue of the South China Sea, the more harsher or the more distant the relationship between China and its Southeast Asian partners. And China needs its Southeast Asian partners, definitely. Anyway, that's all the news we have from today. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook and comment on if you have any interesting ideas. You can comment on our Facebook and Twitter, as well as you can go to our durianasean.com website and listen to us, check on the news on Southeast Asia, or you can send us your ideas and thoughts at durianasean@gmail.com. So stay tuned. We will continue again with a segment on Blast from the Grassroots. And see you.